Welcome back to Bass Fishing Declassified. In today's episode, we have 3 anglers providing some absolute juice for fall jerkbait fishing. Let's check it out.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of Bass Fishing Declassified. Today we're going to give you guys tips and advice on how to catch bass on jerkbaits in the fall time of the year on Ozark lakes. And this is my wheelhouse. I've been doing it for over 50 years. I grew up here in the Ozarks. Been fishing jerkbait since about the mid-1970s, so I've got a lot of good juice I can give you guys on jerkbait fishing here. So we'll just get into just an overview, because we could talk for hours on this topic, but I'm going to give you guys a sort of a foundational approach to allow you to be able to go out and catch some fish this fall. A couple different considerations. The first thing is the timing. You will notice the jerkbait fishing isn't that great in the fall time of the year until the water temperature starts to get down into the 50s. You really need it to get down into the 50s for those bass to start forming suspended in little wolf packs. So for the most part, this is anywhere between late October into November is when it's really good. That's the number one thing. The next thing you need to look for is the type of structure they get on first. And the first thing that they move to in November, usually when that water gets in the 50s, is either secondary creek points or main lake points. These are really the only two structures you need to focus in on. Bass will move into these areas. They'll stay there all winter long, but this is some of the first places they move to in the fall time of the year. Now, the depth and how I like to work the jerkbait is depending upon the sky conditions and the wind. For the most part, if I have some type of say a cloudy, nasty, windy day, these fish are going to be shallower, so I'm going to be fishing up closer to the bank on the points and the point end and sides, usually in less than 10 foot of water. I'll throw to the bank and I'll work the bait back at a fairly fast pace, not pausing it very much at all, just keeping it coming, just jerk, pause, jerk, pause, because I look for those fish to be a little bit more aggressive if they're shallow. Now, if you have a day that's like a bright bluebird sky, like we have today, not a cloud in the sky, not much wind, that's when those fish could be positioned farther off the point end and side. So what I like to do the first is I like to graph out on the points and I look for bait fish. I'm not really looking for fish, I'm just looking for some type of presence of bait fish suspended on those points. If I see fish and bait suspended in that anywhere 10 to 30 foot zone, I just get out off those points. I put my boat in like 15 or 20 foot of water and I just fan cast all around the point. I might cast out in the middle of the lake, to the sides, to the bank. I'm looking to pull those fish up off the bottom or catch some of those fish that are roaming around that point in those wolf packs. Another key is color in jerkbaits. Color is a big thing in jerkbait fishing, and just a foundation I'll give you that is on the cloudy days or the rainy days, use your flat finish or what's called a matte finish. On the sunny days, if you have wind, use a metallic finish. And on those days that are bright with not much wind and if the water is really clear, that's when you want to use a translucent or a clear finish. That'll give you a lot more bites. And one little tip I'll leave you guys with that'll get you a lot more bites is you've got to downsize your line. If you use 6 to 8 pound test line on a jerkbait, it not only gives the bait better action, but it will allow you to get that bait deeper. And a lot of times those better fish, especially if they're out off the ends of the points in deeper water, come at the deepest part that jerkbait gets to. And using 6 pound test line is going to allow you to maximize that depth and get down to the depth of those good fish are at. So give them a try, guys. Like I said, this November to me is usually when it signals when the jerkbait fishing starts to get good in Ozark lakes. It lasts all the way up into April, and it's just one of the most enjoyable, fun ways to catch bass. So we'll check with you guys next time. See you.
Hey guys, Accordion here. Listen, I'm gonna take a few minutes and talk to you about throwing a jerkbait in the Tennessee Valley region. It's one of my favorite things to do in the month of October. It's that fall transition time. The lake turnover hasn't happened yet. The fish are up high in the columns, they're feeding on bait, and they love eating a jerkbait in October. Now, what kind of structure am I looking for when I go to throw my jerkbait? On the TVA, there is a lot of grass. Not all the lakes have grass, but most of them have grass. And when you're talking about October, it's had all summer long, the grass is grown up, it's topped out, and you've still got these nice hard edges that either sit on channel swings, or you've got these hard edges created from shell beds where it's too hard and the grass doesn't grow. Any and all of these hard edges are what I'm targeting in the month of October. There's going to be bait using those hard edges, and there's going to be bass using those hard edges as a barricade to pin that bait up against it. So whether the bass are hiding in the grass and wanting to pin them up against the shell beds where it's open, or on the outside edge where the channel bend hits them, they're going to use that grass as a barrier. And so I'm looking for those shallow humps that have grass and shell beds. I'm looking for those hard hydrilla lines. I'm obviously not throwing this on topped out grass. I'm looking for that edge, and a lot of times that's going to be, I'm going to have my boat in 10 to 15 foot of water, finding an edge of grass that's maybe growing in 8 foot, and I'm working the edge. Now, if you have deeper grass that still hadn't topped out, a jerkbait is obviously a great bait to work over the tops of the grass. So if you have grass growing out in 15, 16 foot and it's topped out and it's only 4 or 5 foot deep, that is another great place. There's still gonna be bass hiding in that grass looking for the bait to come over the top, and they'll come up and ambush your jerkbait immediately. Another key component to a jerkbait is your rod, reel, line setup. So I prefer using a rod that is either a 2-power or a 3-power. That's going to be a medium action or a light medium heavy. That's a 2 is a medium, a 3 is a light medium heavy. That's my preference, and I'll choose a rod that's the length anywhere between a 6'6" and like a 7-foot rod. This is a 7-foot rod. I'm going to go to that shorter 6'6" rod because if I'm fishing around docks and I'm making short little casts that need to be really accurate, I like that short rod. Additionally, you might want a shorter rod if you're not a tall angler and you're fishing from a boat and you like to work your rod and you like to twitch it down. So if you're pointing at a clock, you're pointing at 9 o'clock and you twitch to 6. If you're not a tall person, a shorter rod will benefit you from that to keep you from slapping the water. That being said, you don't always want to twitch straight down. A lot of guys and a lot of anglers think you have to twitch straight down. That's not necessarily true. You can change the depth of your jerkbait by the angle of the twitch of your rod. You can also change the way the jerkbait reacts by the angle of the twitch of your rod. So don't always jerk down. Don't be afraid to jerk sideways or even up to keep it shallower. So those are little tricks you can do with a jerkbait. 2 quick little tips, maybe 3 quick little tips about a jerkbait. Don't always throw one size jerkbait. Pay attention to the size of the bait. Just got off Lake Guntersville at the TVA, and I was throwing this larger jerkbait, getting some bites, and I snagged a shad and realized how small the shad were they were eating. I went down to this much smaller jerkbait, and I mean, I got 10 to 1 bites on a smaller jerkbait. So always pay attention to the size of your bait. Always match the hatch. Go down to a little bitty jerkbait, that's fine. If you must, you can change to a spinning rod. If you go to a really small jerkbait and you're having trouble using a bait caster, don't be afraid to go to a spinning rod with 8-pound fluorocarbon, and you can throw those little bitty light jerkbaits. Tip number 2 is this bait sack right here. These are awesome for treble hook baits. You know, instead of having your rod exposed with your hook sitting there on it and you got it in the rod box or up on the seat grabbing a bunch of other stuff you don't want it to grab, these bait sacks by Tackle Works, Cal Coast Fishing, you literally just drop them in the bag and clip them to your rod, and the hooks aren't going to get on anything. So these are fantastic. Final tip, a way to get some extra bites. There is a theory behind a jerkbait that you've always got to be twitching it, right? Twitch, 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 like a Kevin Van Dam ridiculous twitch, or a twitch pause as it gets colder. That is true. But I'm going to tell you something. I have tested this out many times. Don't be afraid to just burn your jerkbait back for, let's say, like 5 or 6 full cranks. So if you know you got it around fish, you've caught several there, and all of a sudden they're onto you, they're onto your cadence, you can't get them to bite it while you're twitching it, throw the jerkbait out there, literally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 9 or 10. Just burn it back like a crankbait, kill it. Wait a couple seconds, burn it again, kill it. Try that. You will catch a few extra fish. There's something about those bass not wanting that thing to get away from them. So hope this is helpful, guys. We'll see you guys in the next one. Have fun out there in the TVA in the month of October.
Man, it's been getting cool lately. We've had highs in the mid 50s with lows in the low 30s where we've had frost. It is definitely turning into fall. Our water temperatures are dropping quickly, and that means get your jerkbaits out. A jerkbait is one of the best baits that you can throw during this time of year for both largemouth and smallmouth. It's a bait that triggers bites, and it's one that you have a good shot at catching a big fish. Now, I'm looking for a couple of things this time of year. The first is going to be on the feeding flats. If I have some big flats that maybe have some rock sand transition and have some grass mixed in, I'm going to be trying to concentrate on those rock transitions because they're going to be holding heat. Those will be good for both largemouth and smallmouth. If you've got a lake that's predominantly heavy with largemouth and you've got a lot of weeds in that lake, you're going to want to start concentrating on the green weeds. There's going to be a lot of weeds that start dying off as the water temperatures continue to drop. So if you can find areas that are maintaining good green grass, those are going to be key places to look. Additionally, outside of those flats, you generally will have a good break line. Those break lines are going to be the places that those fish are holding and start thinking about moving out to as the winter comes. So you're going to want to concentrate on those break lines, anywhere that's got good green grass and some rock clumps mixed in. That'll be the key places to look. Water temperature is going to be one of the biggest factors in determining where you fish the jerkbait. If you've got 58-degree water temperatures or more, you're still going to want to look on those flats. Those flats are going to be your fall transition areas where the fish are taking advantage of relatively warm water. But if the water temperature is in that mid 50 degrees or less, that's when you're going to want to concentrate on your steeper breaking drop-offs, whether that's on a break line off of a flat, whether it's off of a point, maybe a hump, your structure where those fish are going to start moving to spend the winter months. Now, from a tackle perspective, there's a couple things I like to do. I like to fish my jerkbaits on spinning gear. This is a custom built 6.5 foot medium light action rod. So it's a very light whip stick is like what I like to call it, because I want to be able to jerk the bait hard, but not move it much. If I've got a long rod at that point, I'm moving the bait more than I want. I want to get it to walk and dart and stay relatively in place, and a 6.5 foot rod does that for me. And then I fish it in spinning gear because generally speaking, I'm throwing my jerkbaits on 6 or 8 pound fluorocarbon line. I feel like I can make longer casts with it, as well as get my bait down a little bit deeper. Now I've got here just a good Abu Garcia Zada spinning reel. You want something that's got a good drag on it, because when you do get an active fish that hits a jerkbait and they're going away from you, a lot of times it's like a freight train. They hit it and they just start peeling drag. From a jerkbait perspective, this is something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily recognize. You hear the debate all the time where people are like, I want a sinking bait, or I want a floating bait, or I want one that sits perfectly level in the water and suspends without no movement. I disagree with that a little bit. If I know an exact depth that the fish are at, and I can get my bait down to the strike zone, which is maybe 2 feet above their heads, at that point a suspending bait is great. But if I've got warm water temperature and those fish are up on shallow flats, I actually like to go with a floating jerkbait. This is a Mega Bass high float. This is their, I don't even know if they still make it. It's called their Silent Riser, but it's a floating jerkbait. I like to work it down into the rocks, bash onto it, and get some deflection just like a crawfish that's skittering around. Hence one reason I've got a darker red color. When I hit those rocks, I let my bait slowly rise up out of the rocks, and it generates a ton of strikes for me. Similar to how you'd work a crankbait, only I'm jerking it down into those rocks and those rock transitions in relatively shallow water, that 4 to 6 foot range. If I've got fish in colder water where the fish are out deeper, maybe they're in 15 to 18 feet, and I'm getting my jerkbait down to 8 feet just by jerking it down, I like a slow sinker. This is the Berkley Stunna, and this is a slow sink model. So it sinks very slowly, but if you've got the patience, you can get the bait down to those fish, because in that cold water, they're not nearly as willing to rise up for them. So that's something to keep in mind. It's not only about a suspending bait. You can get jerkbaits that work that float, and you can get jerkbaits that sink. In either case, they all have applications. From a color standpoint, this is something that I think a lot of people don't recognize the value in. During the fall period, when you've got falling water temperatures, a lot of times those fish are lethargic. I like to throw really bright colors at these fish. Anything like these are good baits to trigger strikes. These are all very bright colors that have reaction capabilities in them, meaning it triggers the fish to strike. It may get them to come those couple extra feet to hit this bait. Now, I'm not only going to throw bright baits. I do throw colors that match the hatch, things that are more translucent, but I'll tell you guys, A great tip is if you're struggling to get bit, or you have fish that are following your bait and tracking it to the boat but will not commit, give them something super bright that will antagonize them into biting. It really does make a difference, and I think you'll find that there are times you will outproduce any of your natural colors with some crazy colored bait like this guy right here. The other tip with that is if you're fishing a jerkbait in off-colored water, a lot of times people would tell you you can't fish a jerkbait if it's not clear water. Well, I've got about 1.5 foot visibility on the river here, and I'll go out and I'll crush them on a jerkbait. But I'm throwing a really bright colored jerkbait to help it stand out in that off-colored water. So don't think a jerkbait's only a clear water bait. It's a great bait to catch numbers as well as some of the biggest fish in your lake, and the fall is the best time to get out and do it.
Really quick, if you're struggling to find productive areas on your lake or are new to fishing and want to get pointed in the right direction about where to start fishing, head to our website, fishthemoment.com, and go to our lake breakdowns page. Here you'll find lake breakdowns from myself, Randy Blaukat, and Matt Stefan. I focus on offshore breakdowns, Matt covers smallmouth, and Randy covers shallow water largemouth. These lake breakdowns provide 40 GPS waypoints that you can transfer straight to your fish finder. We give detailed area descriptions, the best conditions to fish each area, lure recommendations, and key strategies for the lake in general. We also give you a guide on how to transfer the waypoints straight to your fish finder so you don't have to worry about the technology gap there. You can scroll through and find breakdowns for all 4 seasons of the year, and we have a lot of lakes here, so you probably will find most of the major lakes in this list already. However, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom and don't see your lake in one of the 4 seasons, you can also get a personal lake breakdown from either Randy or Matt at the bottom of the page, and you can pick any lake in the country and get 40 waypoints picked out personally by Matt or Randy. Check out our lake breakdowns at fishthemoment.com.
Those were some great fall jerkbait tips that I hope you can apply to the lakes and rivers that you fish in your region of the country. Let us know, guys, if there's certain topics or certain areas that you want us to talk about in future videos. We'd be more than happy to cover it for all of you. Thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned. We'll have a new Bass Fishing Declassified episode coming out soon.